Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, Senator Jeff Flake joins us in studio to discuss immigration reform, the Affordable Care Act, and possible U.S. military intervention in the Middle East. Senator Jeff Flake next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. Evidence of chemical weapons attacks in Syria could be leading to possible U.S. military intervention in the region. This as Congress continues to fight over immigration reform and is now dealing with threats of a government shutdown over the funding of Obamacare. Joining us now to discuss these and other issues is Arizona Senator Jeff Flake. Good to see you again.
It's good to be here.
Last time, since you've been here last, you've been named the most beautiful on the Hill, and you got a scorpion sting. You've had quite the experience here lately.
Oh my goodness.
Shall we move on?
Please.
Okay.
All I can say is that scorpion sting. I mean, I got so much sympathy on that thing. I've been looking for a rattlesnake ever since to bite me, but it's
interesting. Social media is.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of crazy.
Let's start with some very serious business here now. There seems to be evidence of chemical weapons attack. I want to get to immigration reform and other issues here in a second, but this is kind of bubbling. Chemical weapons attacks in Syria. What do you know? What's going on here?
Well, it looks like it's without a doubt. I mean, everybody that's going in, just the eyewitness accounts, what the doctors are saying, it seems clear that that's what it was. The government will try to say it was a rebel somehow, but it seems clear that it wasn't. The nice thing is it seems that our international allies are coming forward as well. Even Russia is saying, investigate this. And so if we do have to intervene, hopefully it's part of an international community that does so.
What should be the U.S. response here?
Well, you cannot allow that to go on. We've said that that's a red line, and that red line has been crossed, and so there has to be some kind of intervention. Like I said, I just hope that it's in coordination with our allies.
I was going to say, is this a game changer? And if it's not, what is?
Well, like I said, when you have hundreds of people killed this way, if it turns out that that is the case, and it looks to be so, it's tough to hold back.
Do we need to wait? Does the U.S. especially need to wait for more conclusive evidence, or is that evidence strong enough as it is?
I think we'll be doing due diligence. The international community will be over the coming weeks. And so, you always hope that the government there simply says, we've gone too far and that we can have a peaceful end to all of this. But, when there's chemical weapons being used, then the international community needs to move in, I would think.
I know Senator McCain is saying that U.S. credibility is damaged by not taking more forceful action there in Syria and in Egypt, which I want to get to in a second here. But do you agree with that?
Well, I think that in Syria, when we say we're going to do something, when we continually say that this is the red line and then do nothing when it's crossed, then it does affect our credibility. In Syria, in Egypt, I don't think it's as clear-cut. There, what type of response we should have isn't nearly as clear-cut.
And why is that?
Well, it's a more difficult and complex situation there. Obviously, we would like to see democracy flourish. We had one group that was going about it to start with, at least, didn't end up that way. But certainly, we would have liked to have seen a change, through the electoral process. That didn't happen, so we'll never know what would have happened there. But we're in a tough situation in Egypt, and there are no easy answers.
I was going to say, because on the one side, is it wise to back the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist group? Is it wise to back the Egyptian military, which basically pulled off a coup?
Well, it's certainly tough to continue to support the military when they're killing people in the streets, regardless of what their justification or aim is. It's tough to do. Having said that, the Muslim Brotherhood obviously didn't rule the way that they said that they would. It would have been nice to just see them defeated at the ballot box, which they may have been next year. But like I said, we'll never know because there was the intervention.
Should the U.S. reconsider military aid, economic aid to Egypt? They depend quite a bit on U.S. aid. What are your thoughts there?
I think there are certainly limits to our leverage, and we've seen the limits to our leverage. But obviously, you've got to take those things into consideration. And like I say, when the military is killing people in the streets, how can you justify giving the military aid? And so I think there's certainly going to be a suspension of that aid, and maybe conditions placed on future aid. But we have strategic interests there, certainly. The Suez Canal, obviously a regional player. They've recognized Israel and have a peace treaty there that we need to consider. And so there are no easy answers, and it's tough to just say this is black and white. Having said that, like I said, it's tough to justify military aid to a military that's killing people in the streets.
Last point on this, and let's get back to domestic issues. The concept of the U.S. as the world's police operation been debated for generations. What are your thoughts, especially in this new world, which U.S. leverage, for better or worse, doesn't seem to be what it used to be?
Well, I hate to, give a political answer here, but there's only one to give, I think. You have to take it on a case-by-case basis. One policy to cover the whole world of non-intervention or intervention just doesn't work, and you have to play it by region or, given what your allies are doing, given what strategic interests you have in that country or near that country. So there are a lot of things to take into account, and, that's what diplomacy and statecraft and this is about. So there's no easy answer.
Let's get to something else with no easy answer, is immigration reform here, especially comprehensive immigration reform. The status now of the Senate immigration bill that you know very much of, you helped craft. Where are we with this?
Well, it's obviously passed the Senate. It passed the Senate with a pretty good majority. My goal going into this was to represent Arizona. What Arizona needs, first and foremost, is border security. And I think that this bill certainly does that. I never would have dreamed we would have been able to get what we got for the border in terms of manpower and infrastructure, technology, to get a secure border. And then the other issues, the second border, if you will, is at the workplace, and to have mandatory E-Verify across the country, and to give employers finally the tools. And then you have other issues that certainly help with the border itself. It's a good bill, and I hope that we can get it through.
I was going to say, it seems from a distance, though, that this particular bill isn't going anywhere in the House. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can any immigration reform bill go anywhere in the House?
Yeah, don't write it off yet. We still have the fall, and there's significant pressure, and I think pressure is still mounting to do something here. We have a de facto amnesty right now. For those who are concerned that this bill represents an amnesty, I don't believe it does. But that's certainly what we have right now, and we'll continue to have until we solve this problem. There's no perfect bill. If I were to write it all myself, I would write it a bit differently. But we have to recognize we have divided government. Republicans control just the House of Representatives, Democrats the presidency and the Senate. And so you have to have a bipartisan bill, and therefore there's some give and take there. But having said that, for Arizona, we've suffered the ill effects from a porous border for far too long. Education costs, criminal justice, health care costs, we've borne the brunt of it. And so Arizonans are justifiably upset and justifiably asking that border security come first, and I believe it does in this bill.
Is that message, though, getting through to the House? Because right now it sounds like, especially the phrase pathway to citizenship and some other words, operative words from the Senate bill, it sounds like these things are non-starters over there.
To some, but I think broadly it can go. Path to citizenship. This is earned citizenship. It's a long process. I think that if you look at polls, certainly that's supportive, as long as it's not given, as long as it's not an amnesty. If people who are here have to go through background checks, learn English, pay back taxes, pay fines, pay fees, and then have a long waiting period, that's what people are expecting, and that's what we have in this legislation. So I think it's got a good chance.
So for the critics who say pathway to citizenship, just the phrase, path to citizenship equals amnesty, you say?
That's wrong. Amnesty is an unconditional pardon for a breach of law. It's more akin to what was done in 1986, where you said if you can prove that you've been here for 5 years, you've got a shortcut to a green card. Here we say if you're here illegally and you wish to adjust your status, here's the process you have to go through. And in many cases, it would be easier and faster for somebody to go back to their home country and apply from there because they have to go through background checks. They have to pay fees and fines, have a probationary period of 5 years, and then reapply. Go through additional background checks, pay more fees and fines, wait another 5 years, go through the whole process again. And then the fastest anybody could achieve citizenship after being here illegally is 13 years. That's a long time. That's a long process. That's an earned path to citizenship that I think is proper. I've always felt. And in previous legislation I've introduced, I've had a path to citizenship. I think if somebody's going to be here in a legal status for decades, shouldn't they have the responsibilities and the rights that come with citizenship? That's what makes America America. And so I think that that's proper to be there. It just needs to be a tough, arduous path.
The issue itself, and not, it's so political in so many ways, and so much of it seems to be resting on the Republican side of the aisle. How much is this issue dividing the GOP?
Oh, obviously, there are issues that divide the Democratic Party as well, and this issue doesn't cut specifically across party lines. In the Senate, there were 68 votes for the Senate bill. That's a good number of Republicans and all of the Democrats. So it's not just a party line issue, but it is a divisive issue. It's a tough issue to deal with, and I think as a representative, as a senator, you have to recognize you're not going to satisfy everyone with every bill that you do. You do the best you can, and you work through the legislative process, and that's what we've done here.
Is it unusual for you, because I see the blogs, I see the stories, I see the comments and the whole 9 yards here. Is it unusual for you? I'm guessing you're used to folks on the left, you know, throwing the rocks and the brickbats and stuff. Right. But you're getting hammered from some folks on the right. Talk to us about that.
Well, I think that whenever there's a big piece of legislation that you have to negotiate with the other side on, which you do. If this is divided government, whether we like it or not. I'd certainly like it if we had a Republican in the White House and a Republican Senate, but we don't. And so we've done the best we can, and when you deal with a big piece of legislation that's this important, you're going to have detractors on both sides, and we certainly have that now.
For critics that say the Republican Party is further jeopardizing the Latino vote, especially with the stance that we're hearing from the House and just in general, how do you respond? Is that valid?
You know, this is good policy. It's good policy, and I think good policy begets good politics. In the end, certainly a Hispanic demographic is one that is growing and one that both parties need to take into account. But I can just say that this is good policy, and it's the right thing to do, and I think good politics will follow.
Last question on this. How much has Arizona's image been impacted by the entire immigration debate?
Well, this has kind of been ground zero, certainly with 375-mile border. It's going to be. And there's been a lot of action here at the state level because of the federal government's inaction. And so far be it from me or others to criticize the state legislature or others for trying to solve a problem that the federal government just won't solve. And so what I'm trying to do as a federal official is do what we can to solve this problem, because as much as the state has tried to do in good faith, there are limits to what the state can do, because this is largely a federal issue. The border is federal, obviously. Most of labor law is federal. So the federal government has to move, and that's what we're trying to do. Okay,
and you're saying don't count the House out yet, but do we count the House out yet as far as the Senate bill as we know it? I mean, it's going to be a piecemeal kind of approach?
We never thought that the House would just take up the Senate bill as it is. Yeah. I've served in the House. I know that the disdain with which they hold the Senate, and I've had to take back a lot of bad things I've said over the years.
Yeah. All right.
But I think that we will have a process that we can get to an ultimate bill that the President can sign.
Okay, let's get to the budget, because it sounds like the continuing resolution is in danger of not continuing here. First of all, what is the continuing resolution? Give us a description of what that is, and why won't it continue?
Well, when you don't go through a regular budget process and actually appropriate, as we should, 12 appropriation bills every year before the end of the fiscal year, you have to do what's called a continuing resolution to fund government through the next year. And that's what we've been doing for years and years in Washington now, and it doesn't reflect well on us as an institution that we have to do that. But September 30th is the end of the fiscal year. If we haven't passed all the appropriation bills, and we've only considered one in the Senate, which didn't go through, then you have to pass the so-called CR, and that's what we'll have to do.
Okay, there seems to be a threat, and again, I don't know if this is a credible threat here. I need your explanation on this. From, again, those on the right, Republicans saying that if we don't find a way to defund the Affordable Care Act, no continuing resolution. Is that a valid threat?
Well, I would love to defund Obamacare. But by trying to do it in the CR, or continuing resolution, I would simply be pretending to defund Obamacare. Most of Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, is funded through what's called mandatory spending that's not subject to annual appropriation. And so while I share the goal of some of my colleagues that want to use the CR as a mechanism to defund Obamacare, I'm afraid that we'd be doing something that we know isn't defunding Obamacare and pretending that we did. And part of the reason the public holds us in such low esteem is because we do things that we say we aren't, and this is the case of that, in my view.
Is the idea of using the debt ceiling as leverage as well another case where, again, it sounds like folks are saying we'll do anything we have to do, including the continuing resolution, even though much of the Affordable Care Act is involved with that. We'll do anything we have to do to shut the government down to make sure our voice is heard. Does that make sense to you?
Well, in my view, the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is falling of its own weight. The President is granting exemptions here and everywhere, delaying certain portions of it. My guess is other parts will be delayed as well. I think that one thing that is achievable is to delay the individual mandate, and we ought to delay it. But trying to defund it through the CR just doesn't work. And the notion that the President is going to sign freestanding legislation, or even with the CR, something that defunds Obamacare, I think just isn't going to happen. So I want to do what's achievable, and what is achievable, I believe, and hope we can delay the implementation, because I share the concern that a lot of my colleagues have that once it's in, once these exchanges get up and running and people start getting their care through them, it's tough to turn back, and that's not where we need to go.
Do you think most Americans, most Arizonans want to turn back, especially
Yes.
once Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act gets implemented and they see what's offered and what their options might be?
Well, keep in mind, I think the structure of Obamacare just isn't sustainable. Yeah, you cannot have this structure work. To have healthy individuals of a young age, just when the guarantee issued says that you can wait until you're sick to get a policy because you have to be covered, pre-existing conditions have to be covered. If that fee is lower than your premium, or if that fine, that's what you're going to take. And so the structure just isn't going to work. So I think we ought to delay the whole thing. Frankly, I've voted 37 times in the House to defund it. I'd love to defund it. You just can't do that through the CR.
The CBO federal deficit would be reduced, again, in 10 years. This is the CBO, Congressional Budget Office here, supposedly nonpartisan.
Right.
Deficit reduced by $138 billion in 10 years when fully implemented. Are they wrong?
Yes, they are. It depends on the assumptions. What the CBO comes out with is only as good as the assumptions that you put in. And the problem is they have to basically take Congress's word for it. They have to assume, for example, that we have taken care of the so-called doc fix when we never do. We just punt it down a couple of years later. And so those assumptions that are in there that say that we'll save money assume that Congress will take action that we haven't had the stomach to take yet. And so it just it doesn't make sense.
There's a new study that shows that most likely 8 million people will take advantage of health care and the options therein. The government estimate, I think, originally was 7 million new customers. Does that not, A, show a need, and B, that the pool will be diverse enough to be able to support this program?
There is a great need for affordable care. None of us who oppose Obamacare deny that. We've got to have a replacement, and some of us believe that we have that. There is the need. Nobody denies that. But this notion that was put forward with Obamacare, that, for example, that most companies you'd be able to keep the policy that you have and that they wouldn't drop coverage, when it would be far cheaper for a lot of companies to simply drop the coverage and pay the fine. You're going to actually load more expense on the taxpayer than is projected, far more. I think we're already seeing that the structure just isn't going to work.
Are we not seeing, though, in some states, things are getting a little higher. But in other states, California, I believe in particular, where we're seeing costs, general health care costs and insurance costs lowering because of the impending Obamacare.
I don't know how you can attribute anything. There were no cost controls in Obamacare. There's no tort reform.
Well, just the result.
There was nothing
the result of what's going to happen, I think, is what's their point.
I'd be surprised if you could attribute anything that's happening to the positive effects of Obamacare, because there's simply nothing in there to control costs and no market mechanisms to allow the market to actually discipline cost.
I know it's a maybe not a fair question, but Obamacare, Affordable Care Act here, nothing the way we were doing things before here. Those aren't your only two options. But if those are the only two options.
Those aren't the only two options.
So you're not even going to answer the question.
No,
all
no,
right. I thought I'd get you, give you at least a try there.
Nobody is defending the current system as it is. Many of us have had a lot of reform ideas that we'd like to continue with, but not through Obamacare.
So the current system would be better left as it is, as opposed to what is Obamacare?
Nobody is suggesting that we have the current system, and the current system wouldn't be there. Like I said, if we repeal, we'll replace with something better.
NSA surveillance in the U.S. I don't know how. Again, this is one of these stories that we're kind of hearing about as much as I think we're allowed to hear.
Right.
What's going on here, and what is the NSA doing something wrong? What are they charged with doing in the first place?
Well, they have a pretty broad mandate, and I think all of us in Congress were surprised to see the breadth and scope of some of the collection of data. Having said that, there are controls that are statutory, that are there, and that the NSA does comply with. Now, I'm not suggesting that everything they have done has been legal or above board. We're still finding out some of that information, and where additional controls are needed, we'll put those in. But we want to make sure that the administration has the tools that they need, whichever administration it is, but that we balance civil liberties. And one thing I've learned is that whichever administration it is, whether it's Republican administration or Democrat administration, they'll take whatever tools you give them and then some. And it's the job of the Congress to make sure that you balance that with civil liberties. And I think we've tried to strike that balance. We've done fairly well in certain circumstances, but when technology changes, you have to go in and revisit it.
The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Courts, these FISA courts, first of all, briefly explain what they are, and secondly, aren't they designed to be a major control here?
Well, they are, and they do weigh in, and certainly they have prohibited certain surveillance that the administration would have liked to have done. But these courts they're federal judges appointed to do just this kind of this kind of check on surveillance. And so when government wants to surveil or wants to do certain investigations, they have to go before this court or these individuals and explain what they're doing. And FISA, we get reports in Congress, certainly the intelligence communities, on what's being done and what's being asked. And we go in periodically and check. When we did the Patriot Act years ago, there were parts of it that I was uncomfortable with. I had several amendments and changes. We sunsetted the controversial provisions and came back and changed some of those. I had several amendments of mine adopted as well. So you have to continually go in and try to balance the civil liberties concerns and privacy issues with the need for government to make sure that we're safe.
Last question. You talked about voting to defund the Affordable Care Act in the House, and you also talked about the House's relationship with the Senate and how there's a little bit of acrimony there. Not much, but maybe just a little. Now that you've been in the Senate for a while here, you got your feet wet, you got your desk all shaped up and everything. The differences, what do you see?
Well, the founders were wise to set up a different institution. You could have two bodies that run like the House, that run simply on majority rule. In the House, if you have 219 as opposed to 218, you control everything. You control which bills come to the floor because you control the Rules Committee. You control which amendments are offered, how much time to debate, everything. In the Senate, it's much different. For a bill to come to the floor, it really has to come by unanimous consent or by a supermajority. And so even as an individual, lowly, underclassman, you have significant leverage in the Senate that you don't have in the House. And so That's why people from the House generally like to go over to the Senate, because you can exercise that leverage. And I think it's a good balance, and there have been efforts to change the structure of the Senate and the rules to get rid of the filibuster, for example, and I think that would be a travesty because you need a body that operates differently from the House.
It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of 8, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.